So it's time to hear a little from you. What are you noticing? What did you notice this last week around speaking or any other thing of relevance? Happy to hear. Hi.
So, I am the caregiver for my husband who has a disability that is a progressive disease, and he also has dementia.
Hmm.
So, this this kind of has developed quickly over the last year. Like my life has changed dramatically in the
Wow. So it's
past
new.
year.
It's new for you, relatively. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I started noticing initially I was very angry and frustrated and um, just not very kind sometimes to him because I was like, it was all about me and how it was just, I was in such an untenable position that I didn't want to be in. Like, I didn't like the situation.
Yeah.
And I've worked really hard to to be more compassionate and to be more
Oh,
um, kind of in tune with nature around this, um, and just practicing yoga, practicing meditation. So over this time, I I feel like I've I've gained some ability to um, not be so self-centered and so self-possessed about what's happening to me.
hmm.
And um, it really changes um, what comes out of my mouth.
I bet.
um, and the things that have kind of resonated with me in this transformation, and it's not by no means perfect. Um, I can fall off really easily, which I did last week. But the things that resonate are thinking about how we are of nature and what is happening with him and my situation is it's part of nature
Yes.
and there is no fighting it. I was so wanting to fight previously about a year ago and resigning myself to kind of the flow of it, the nature of it, and also realizing I can be adaptable and resilient like nature. I am of nature. And so this whole and then I got tired of listening to people complain about the rain, over the summer. And it seemed like last week I was in this miserable place and people had been complaining about the rain. And I don't say much when people complain about things like that. I just listen. And every morning I go outside. I kind of like you on your deck. I'm not going outside to meditate, but I open the door and I look outside and just like look and listen and feel the air. And it was third Friday, the day that it really poured. It had started to rain. And I said, there's some really good things in the rain. And it was such a metaphor for what I've been, my situations. And so I'm saying a lot here. But anyway,
it's good stuff. Keep going.
I really feel this way of when I touch in to this place that you call heart, I don't have to think about what comes out of my mouth. It's just the right thing.
Yes.
And when I'm not in that, when I'm in my own selfish little world of desire for me and, this kind of smaller world, it just, I say, I can say and do, harmful things and not kind things. And it makes me feel terrible after. Like, it's not a good place versus when I feel in tune, living in my heart, acting from my heart. I feel big. Not big. I feel small when I'm not there. I feel like closing in and being quiet and not letting people in. But when I'm in touch with my heart, I feel fearless. I feel like fearless and everything's going to be okay. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I felt like I needed to hear that. And I just really appreciate the wisdom, the hard-won wisdom that you have around this. I know it's not easy to have that sort of caretaking responsibility, and yet you found your way with it. And, you found your way into a certain kind of gratitude about it even. And I think that's amazing. And I love the way you frame it as, it's all natural. It's all natural. Yeah. Just allows acceptance to have that point of view.
And it also feels like when I really am in tune, I feel like I'm doing absolutely the most important thing in the world that I could do. Like I'm supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
Like,
beautiful.
Like I found that I just happened to read this poem. I'll bring it next time and read it. It's just really short, but it just speaks to this. And it came up just in the right time for me that I happened to come across it. And it was so to this point. So.
All right. Yeah. If you want to share it next time, I'd love to hear it. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you. And do take care of yourself too. I do want to say, you've had some, it's also a loss what you've had. So I hope you get a chance to acknowledge that with yourself and with other people, and you get a break once in a while. So be well.
Thank
you. I was just, as I was listening, I was thinking about my tendency to get annoyed with my wife if she doesn't remember something I said to her. But occasionally I think, well, it's good practice. you may be in a position where she remembers hardly anything you say to her at some point in your life. We'll see. All right, let's see, Bob.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So with this speech, it's sort of dovetailed nicely with the situation I'm in, which is in a somewhat newer romantic relationship, maybe 7 or 8 months or what have you, and been living in the same space for, I don't know, 5, 6 months of that. So it's interesting now, like observing what's happening versus Bob, like of whenever 10 years, 15 years ago, whenever I was in an equivalent sort of situation. Um, because, once you're past that initial stage where everything is blissful and you're kind of in that normalization, you invariably hit some of those things. And we had gone through this period of me saying something and she getting triggered, and then myself hearing that and then very quickly getting angry that she's upset. And it was, that sort of thing. And then two upset people equals not very skillful relating, right? That math
Right.
equation.
Yeah,
That's the
the
math.
math works. It
That
works
math.
that way.
That's the math equation right there. Yeah.
Two triggered
Um,
people.
yeah, two triggered people. And so, at the beginning of this class, a few weeks ago, it was sort of a reminder. And so I had seen a couple instances where she was, something had tweaked her or what have you, and I spotted it, and I was like, okay, I can catch it. I'm not gonna get carried away. And I had sort of like internal mantras or whatever. Um, but there was something still that I could only hang on for so long before like, what, and then you kind of fall back into it, which is interesting. But I invited her. She did too. But afterwards, to kind of just discuss like what's going on. And it was interesting. She goes, I got a little tweak, but you get very upset, um, that I'm upset. And it's like we were paying attention and spending some time talking it through. And it's, we both mutually came, sort of realized that, we're just, we're touching upon each other's, we just call them boo-boos, right? Just to make it not so serious. But like we were stumbling upon each other's soft, sensitive points. And just noting that and realizing that together, um it's possible to be more attuned to that in myself and her, to both have understanding of, the person you're dealing with has their own internal environment that's not like mine, but we all, we both have our soft spots, and it does come up as like younger energy, like in my case, being yelled at or being scolded. You're very defensive, like it's a very young energy, like being yelled at by my father is what comes up. Um, and wow, how that comes out and expresses itself even now as a man, almost, I'm almost 51. It's amazing how we carry these things with us, and they're dormant until just something happens. But
Especially a romantic relationship, you know, especially.
yeah,
Yeah, brings
yeah,
that
yeah,
up.
yeah, because that carries some, right. Yeah, a little extra
Yeah.
juice there. But it is really interesting, but that was very helpful to at least like acknowledge it to each other, especially when you're calmed down and in the recognition, and start to own your own environment, right? And oh, it's not you, you're bad because you're saying this and whatever. You shouldn't say this or that. Like, that's a tough landscape to manage through. It's more like, I'm gonna try to own my sensitivity. She's gonna try to own her thing. We're not always gonna do well, but um, that's helpful. And I do have to be thankful for, even just this class dropping that in, that whether it's an intention or just a little reminder, like the intelligence you talked about earlier, suddenly like it came out of nowhere, like the reminder, like, oh, we could kind of here's a chance to be in tune before I got carried away, you know? So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Bob. Wow,
Yeah.
wow, that's certainly a territory I bet everybody listening can understand and relate to. And yeah, it's kind of the arena of, what should I say, where, the possibility of real human maturity can emerge from that, from negotiating that kind of triggering situation, which I think everybody in some way, everybody has wounds, and getting close to someone usually touches them. I'll just share something that I've found helpful. And again, this doesn't always work, but I find it really hard to have my wife have a complaint about me, or my children for that matter. And it does provoke this sort of defensiveness you talked about. And something that's kind of helped kind of catch it is to say to myself, this isn't about me right now. This is about her. I can listen to her and figure out what the pain is that she's about me right now. I'll figure that out later. What is actually true later in all of this. And I'll just take this opportunity to get to know the pain that she's in. Now, that doesn't always work, I have to say, but as a kind of self-talk, it's worked enough that I really like it, to just like buy yourself time, and it kind of diverts the kind of something wrong about me. If somebody's upset with me, it must mean I'm deeply flawed and unlovable. That thing just jumps in so quickly, because it is such a young place inside of us. I'm deeply flawed and unlovable, and I better defend myself as strongly as I can against that possibility. And if you can just some way kind of insert a level of presence into that, to say, this isn't about me right now, and let me just listen. And I notice, I can start with that intention. And I think you mentioned this. This is very accurate. I think you start with that intention, and it gets chipped away at, in the course of a conversation. And pretty soon something said, and you feel like you just have to defend yourself. You just have. And it comes out of the fact, I think we're all distorting each other all the time. Our perceptions, especially when we're wounded, especially when we're coming from a wounded place, we're always distorting other people's, what they say, where they're coming from. And it's hard to hear that when somebody else's version of you doesn't match your own version of you, and you feel like you have to defend your own version of you. And it just has helped me to kind of say, she gets to have her perceptions. Something like that. She gets to have her perceptions. I don't need to actually correct them. There'll be a moment when I can do that, when I can say how I actually see it, or see myself, or where I'm coming from. There'll be a moment for that. But right now, she gets to, it just buys some time. So if that's at all helpful, go with it. But it is all about attunement with reality, and I do think that perspective is closer to reality. That when somebody's in pain, if they're in their wound, if they're, and if they're kind of directing it at you in some form of blame, it's really about them for that point. Until later, there may be something for you to own in that, to say, that was insensitive of me, or I really am sorry that I did that. But, wait, give yourself some space, give it some space. Anyway, that's my little teacherly thing. All right, thanks.
Thank you. That was so touching.
All right, you're welcome. Yeah, the interesting thing about human nature is we're all more similar than we are different. So, Sandy, hello.
Hi. So I've been thinking a lot about the wholesome and unwholesome, and as you're talking, it's kind of what I've been thinking about all week. And so I have a 20-something-year-old nephew who's been really struggling with addiction, and um his legal woes caught up with him. Been in active addiction for, and my brother, his father, has a like 30-year history of addiction. And and he's sober right now, but he's basically a sober addict. Like he's never taken any responsibility for all of the fallout of the last 30 years, and so it's just been really rough. And so his son ended up finally with a court date, and he ended up being sentenced to prison for a year, which is devastating. He's 25.
Yeah, it's devastating.
And I've been talking to my brother a lot on the phone, which is challenging because he's got his own stuff, and I've been really trying to just listen because he's in so much pain. And I've had to put aside the pain that he's caused to just kind of try to be there for him because he's just hurting so much. And he started talking about how he was just really he was going from being sad to being angry, and it was all very emotional. There was just a lot. And at one point he was like, well, I've never done anything like that, and I've always taken responsibility, and I was like, no, you haven't. Like I just instead of just letting him do what he needed to do and say what he needed to say to try to make sense of the situation, I turned into a that's not right, which didn't help. And it immediately, like instantly made everything worse. Like, like as it came out of my mouth, like instantly. And it, but, but, whereas in the past, I may have doubled down and stood my ground and made him admit that he's blah, blah, blah. He kind of blew up at me, and then I was just like, you're right. I'm sorry. Like that's not what we're talking about here. And I'm really sorry. And just stopped it. Which enabled us to continue to have a conversation. And it, didn't make everything all better, but for once it didn't make it worse.
And it was attuned. It was tuned to what was needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't the moment in time for him to face whatever he's done. No.
And it wasn't possible. And there was already too much to do, or too much to think about. And, I didn't need to be right. I didn't. So,
yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Hey, you're welcome. That's a great motto. I don't need to be right. How often we've been unattuned in our speech because we were charging ahead being right. So thank you, Sandy. And good luck with that situation. Wow. That seems like a really big one to handle in your family. All right. Jennifer.
Hello.
Hello.
I was thinking about what you were saying about not taking what is not given to us. And then I was thinking about, okay, well, and you talked about the tree and nature, and food, which feels obvious to me to put that into my brain. And then I just started to think, well, what is given to us? So, like, it's kind of what's not given to us and what is given to us. How do we look at that on a daily and kind of think, what am I taking or not taking that's wholesome or not wholesome?
Mm-hmm.
With regard to how you are describing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of consuming resources, do I really need that? Might be a question that I would ask before I buy something that I could easily afford. It's not about affording it. It's about, like, do I need this? And so that might be a really daily kind of example. Or like, what kind of, around food, what kind of food industry do I want to support by my purchases? Might be something that I think about. I like to support local farms. I like to support organic farming, and I like to make it financially possible for people to be doing the right thing around food and food systems, within my power and within certain limits. It's certainly nothing perfect. So that might be something that I think about. I think about energy consumption. Some of this is ingrained from having depression parents. you may know what I mean. You may be too young, but my parents went through the depression, and so lights were not left on. And if it's possible to make one trip instead of two into town, to do that, those sorts of things. So, and it's about simply, from my perspective as a teacher, at least here, it's about developing a consciousness of using what you use consciously and wisely. Whatever you consume of this world's resources, to use it consciously and wisely.
So is it at all, I mean, it sounds mostly the resources rather than like the mental part of maybe even of somebody else. I mean, is it, when you talk about what's given to you or what's not given to you,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think about anything other than actual physical things? Is it at all psychological or mental or emotional?
Okay. Well, when I think of the second precept, I have to say it's mostly about physical kinds of things. But, as I said, I often, from the point of view of gratitude, I'm actually often more grateful for immaterial things. To give you an example, my appreciation for my parents has only grown through the years, I have to say. It kind of, if you think of it as a stock market, probably the low point in the stock market was sort of teenage and early 20s, and since their stock has risen since then. And I am just aware of how much I have been given in terms of my personal habits from them, my way of thinking, my perspective, how I treat my family, what I value. So that's what I feel has been given. And I also think it just in terms of, I've been given an amazing education. I won't go into the details, but I feel like I've gotten an incredible education in my life. And there's, I don't know, don't want to use that word obligation that goes with that. I use the Dharma. There's a Dharma that goes with that. There's a duty. There's a to pass it on in some way, and to, use what power I have in terms of people for their betterment, not simply to get ahead in the, in the narrow sense. So I'd have to kind of, in some ways I'm on territory that I haven't wholly fleshed out, but there's a whole kind of attitude around what one has if you really see what you've been given in the course of getting it, that so much has been given to you. And so, I've ended up in a pretty upper middle class life. And it certainly wasn't true of my father. And we have a lot of money growing up until the Russian wheat deal in 1972. We changed the economy of our farming town overnight. And suddenly there was an affluence that I hadn't known. But I do think there's a certain dharma that comes with that affluence of, I want to make it work for everybody, not just for myself. It seems to have worked pretty well for myself, but there's an intentionality, like how would it actually work for everybody? I like Lynn Twist. We're out of time, but I just want to mention Lynn Twist got this saying from Buckminster Fuller, which I really love. She wants to work for a world in which everyone can thrive and in which no one is left out. That seemed like a statement about, kind of an ultimate statement of not taking what's not given in a certain way and making it into a positive statement, to work for a world where everybody can thrive and nobody's left out. So I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but that's what occurs to me to say. All right, so everybody have a good week. I'll talk to you next week. Keep observing, keep paying attention to the whole topic of integrity and how it impacts your life through the week, and share your stories. And I really thank you for the stories today. They were really moving to me and I learned a lot. So thank you, everybody.